Back again with another movie review. My name is Josh. Thanks for checking out the channel. And if you click the thumbnail, you're here to talk about Smile. So Smile came out earlier this year, and I originally did react to the trailer for this one, and I even remember during the trailer that it had a couple of genuinely kind of creepy images and even a little twist thingy at the end that really kind of made me poo a little bit in my pants. I had all full intentions of seeing this in the theater, and then I don't remember when it was actually going to come out. I think it was over the summer or maybe early fall, something like that effect, and for some reason just didn't make it to the theater to see it. I do remember hearing little bits and pieces of people being like, hey, you know, that was pretty good, or, you know, it's been a really good year for horror movies, and I was thinking like, man, I've seen a couple horror movies and some of them haven't been that great, but then Smile kept getting thrown up there. So we're getting towards the end of the year, and I'm trying to put together my list of my favorites and my least favorites for the year, and I was going down the list of movies that were released, and I was like, oh man, I missed Smile. So popped that one in this morning, checked it out, and I have to say, it put a weird smile on my face. See what I did there? Weird smile. So this was a pretty sweet movie. It's definitely something that borrows a lot from various other movies and stories that you're probably familiar with, but not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, in this day and age, it's really hard to come up with something completely and utterly original. So this one of borrowing or pick and choosing little bits and pieces of stories and melding them together is not necessarily a bad idea. And in this case, I think for me, it definitely worked for the most part. Got done with the movie genuinely pretty creeped out and in a not super happy place, which I think is a good place for some horror movies to put you in because that's kind of the point of them. But there are some shortcomings to the movie. Basic premise of the movie is you have the main character Rose, who is played by, I just found out, actually Kevin Bacon's daughter, Sosie Bacon? She looks a lot like her mother, that's for sure. So we're first introduced to Rose at the beginning of the movie as a child, where she witnessed something pretty bad, it seems like happened to her mother. And then we jump forward to current time, where she is an adult working as a psychologist in a mental hospital, basically dealing with people that have mental issues, and it appears that she's very overworked and very committed to her job. You start to get little bits and pieces more about her as the story goes on, and it's pretty good. So I'm gonna try and keep this mostly spoiler free till the very end, and then I'll just give a couple spoilers in there. So she witnesses something kind of drastically horrible happen in front of her, and then she has to deal with the ramifications of that. And that basically unfolds the rest of the movie, where she's trying to piece together what she saw and then what's happening to her from this moving forward. If you've seen the trailers, then you know that there's a lot to do with Smiles, and there's something potentially coming for her and or following her that likes to smile.
I'm seeing something no one else can see except for me. It's smiling at me.
Which we'll talk about just a little bit more of, and then we get to the spoiler section. But aside from that, my general feelings for the movie were the movie is made seemingly really well. It's very well shot. They do a lot of things very close. So there's a lot of close-ups, and that definitely increases the intensity and the tension just because you can't see what's happening like right behind or around someone. Some of that does seem a little telegraphed sometimes, where you're like, oh, I'm looking this way so I know there's going to be something behind me, but they subvert expectations every now and then as well. The thing I'm kind of up in the air about for me, it actually is the sound design in this movie. I'm not sure, as I haven't watched many other people's reviews of these, if they liked it or they didn't like it. I was torn because I understand how and why they're utilizing sound the way they do in this one, because it's very abrupt, it's very off-putting, and it's very scary for a lot of the movie. And a lot of the movie is very quiet. There's not really like a score or soundtrack to go with this one, so you're really listening for those audio cues, and that really amplifies the tension a lot, but also can come off somewhat as a little bit as a cheap scare every once in a while, or undue or undeserved tension in spots where maybe it's not really scary. That being said, there are a lot of things that do come through that are scary, but it's tough because, I mean, a lot of movies are made by their ability to use good sound and music and things like that. I mean, John Carpenter is one of my favorites, and his sound design and his soundtracks work so perfectly with his movies. I think there's a lot more of like Insidious and or some of the more modern ones like Hereditary, where, you know, they use the very loud, very abrupt noises coming from very soft or no sound, and they use it a lot. But this is like a lot. So I actually had to turn down the volume a good bit and put on subtitles so I could actually read what was going on without having my eardrums pop, just because of how loud it was. The thing that kind of gets me with a lot of horror movies is some of the logic stuff, and you know, if you're trying to figure something out, or if you're trying to explain to people about what's going on, and if everybody is just an idiot or everybody's a horrible person, it really takes me out of a movie. And this one, it bordered on that, where you have something happening to a seemingly reputable person, and then nobody really wants to listen to them, except for maybe one person as the story goes. And that's a person that has a lot of evidence. That in of itself is a little bit of a conundrum for me, because it's very unbelievable, but at the same time, in the context of how this movie is set up, it also kind of makes sense, because so much of the stuff that's happening to her is happening specifically to her, not anybody else around her that can't actually see that. Which brings me to my next actual compliment to this movie. It is the fact that I probably will never watch it again because it was pretty creepy. Like, there were some pretty genuinely creepy moments, and the horror movies that really, I want to say, kind of disturb me are the ones where you're dealing with something that you literally have no control over. I'm a person that loves horror movies. You can see some of the stuff around me. But I like things there that are there to fight. You know, if they're monsters, or if they're, you know, Jason Voorhees, or even Chucky crawling around. Things like that, where you can see them, other people can see them. They may not believe you at first, but ultimately it comes together and, you know, you do something about it. When there are battles and struggles that happen, you know, in the consciousness, it's hard. And it's, I think one of my bigger fears would be that what happens if you randomly woke up in like a mental institute and you were trying to convince people that you aren't crazy, but nobody believes you. It's just some of those thoughts like that, and things do kind of really freak me out. So when there's a movie that's kind of really focused on very similar things, it's not like I'm going to be rewatching it for fun a lot, if you know what I mean. But again, ultimately that's a compliment, because that's the type of movie they were trying to make. It's just not my favorite type of horror movie. So my ratings and my view of it are going to be a little skewed, but I can understand the quality of it. And again, if that's the type of movie that you like, you're probably going to like it a lot more than I did, or at least rewatch it a lot more than I will, because whew, that was a little creepy. Other than that, the acting was really good in the movie. I mean, most of the people played their parts really well. Most of the characters were written pretty well. Probably one of my bigger complaints were that some of the characters were very, very one-dimensional, and that they are exactly what you thought. I mean, they set up these people to be there, and they're very specific roles. You know, like this is the very materialistic, kind of scummy, garbagey sister and her husband, and there's just some people in there that you're just like, these aren't real people, are they? But then also you kind of maybe think you may know some people that are like that. So I guess it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way and wasn't my favorite. Some of the side characters, even her fiance, turned out to be kind of a... But there weren't really a lot of well-known people, at least to me. I mean, there might be some from some more younger cast and things like that, but I did see one of the folks from Harold and Kumar was in this one, playing a doctor, which is always fun to see. But overall, I'd say it was a really good horror movie. I mean, it was one that was very tense, had a lot of messed up images that'll be burned in the head a little bit, which is very reminiscent of a couple other movies that I think this kind of borrowed from. So before I get into spoilers, we're just going to go to a rating overall for this one. So out of 10 smiles, I'm going to give this one probably... Oh, it's tough. It's tough because, again, I think it's a not bad movie. Like, the quality is good, the script, the writing, for the most part, is good. It's shot really well. I'm not a huge fan of the sound design. It's just not a movie that I would care to watch again. So I'll probably still give it a 7. I'm going to give this 7 smiles out of 10. I think if this was my type of horror movie, then I'd probably be a little more amped for it, as it is well made. But I'm not going to rewatch it, and that's a big thing for my scale and scoring. I'm going to have to keep it about a 7. Alright, now from there we're going to go into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, go ahead, stop it here and go check that out and then come on back. So overall, I really did enjoy this movie. I think the things in reflection that I kind of disliked about it is kind of a little bit of what it's borrowing from. We've seen this stuff before. So, I mean, we've seen a cursed item or something of that effect where you have basically a limited amount of time before it's going to be your demise and you're trying to figure it out before that happens. And then there's ultimately some resolve that comes from that. My biggest problem with this one, because there's not a problem of reusing that, I actually kind of like that formula. It's worked really well in the past. The Ring is one of my favorites. Not necessarily end well all the time, but what it got to this one was when it did get to the end, I definitely kind of saw it coming. Like, it had a couple of misdirects at the end where you're like, okay, maybe this is going to go one way, and then it's, well, maybe it's going to go this way, but, and then it kind of goes the way I figured out about 3/4 to halfway through that it's gonna go, and how it's gonna possibly make a way for a sequel or something like that, which wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, you can get a line of these movies going because of how the format is set up of the curse and just passing it on to the next person. A couple of the things that really did kind of bug me a little bit is that in movies that were similar, so if it's The Ring or It Follows or, you know, things like that, there's a lot more, to me, impending dread from those because I get to see what's actually there a little bit more. This one is very, very different in that it's much more, you have to use your imagination to figure out what's going on in her head because it doesn't show her seeing a lot of things. She sees a couple of things. Like there's a couple times where this demon or entity, whatever it is, does, you know, come face to face with her, but that's like twice in the whole movie, and she slips into madness real quick, which I don't blame her for because, you know, if things are happening and then they're not actually happening, that's pretty upsetting. But I just think that you could have utilized a lot more of things in the background because the camera shots were really nice and set up for that, to where, you know, you could see a smile over here, you could see a smile over there, whatever it may be, or somebody just looming in the background. And even when you talk about the doctor, that she kind of got it from secondhand after the fact, he had his drawings on the wall, and like nothing really ever came of that. So there's not really much more going back into the lore of it, which is okay as well. It leaves a little more mystery, which again leaves a little bit more for the potential for the future. Because I mean, even like in It Follows, I don't think they ever explained anything about that one, and that was a really solid movie. I like the music and sound in that one a lot more though. It wasn't a bad movie, it's just not my type of horror movie, so it's still really worth a watch, and it had some really freaky kind of images. The actual entity thing at the end, when you got to see it, I kind of dug that. It was pretty creepy looking. I think it harked on a lot of people's fears of long, lanky, really large, big eyes, long hair, like again The Ring, a little bit stuff in that one, and it was pretty creepy. But at the same time, again, I kind of definitely seen how it was going to end. I was even telling my girlfriend halfway through, I was like, well, she just needs to go to a cabin by herself, pull a little frailty on this thing, but you know what's going to happen. I'll leave my phone there. Your phone's got GPS. That guy's a cop. He's going to come here. It's going to keep going. That was probably my biggest concern with it, other than the actual audio did start to bother me a little bit just because how loud it was, and I thought it was kind of cheap because at a point, like, you can use that really well of, you know, having the sound really amplify a scare, but I started to get the sense that it was using those to scare you instead of actually having scary things happen. Although there were some scary things happening, like a head twist, and yeah, that was also in the trailer though, and I knew it was coming.
I'm just really scared that something bad is going to happen.
Nah. But other than that, I'm still going to stick with my rating. 7 out of 10 smiles for that one. I would definitely probably watch a sequel. Oh, man. Although I have to get mentally ready for that one. But I don't know. Let me know in the comment section. Did you like it? Did any of those things bother you? Or were you a pretty big fan of it? Overall, solid horror movie. I mean, definitely worth the watch. I've seen a lot worse. But I also could really go for some, you know, serial killers and monsters in them too. So let me know in the comment section. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button if you would. It'd be fantastic. And as always, you're awesome. Peace out.